morning, everyone. My name is Deona Hooper, and I am the founder and editor-in-chief of Social Work Helper. And I am here doing the welcome address today with Darla Coffey from the Council on Social Work Education. Hi, Darla.
Hi, Deona. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I am not a morning person, but this is one of the things that I love to do. So I'm just going to check in with the chat box real quick and just kind of see where people are coming from. I see a whole bunch of good mornings. You guys are up early, so thank you so much. I see shipping is in the house. A lot of folks from Philadelphia, Widener, Ohio University, and UNCG. Thank you guys for being a sponsor on this summit. We've been blessed to have a lot of great sponsors who are supporting the vision of what we're trying to do here. So I just want to look at a couple of real quick and see who else is checking in. I see folks from Tennessee, Louisville, Fordham, Albuquerque, Panama City. Wow. And let's see who else. We have Alaska, Albany, New York, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Des Moines, Iowa. So we got a huge Kannapolis, North Carolina. Wow, there's folks from kind of everywhere. Pueblo, Colorado, Miami-Dade College, Concordia. Wow, good morning, guys. Thank you so much for showing up. So before I talk to Darla, and I want you guys to know some of the great things that CSWE is doing, I just want to kind of share with you guys what Darla means to Social Work Helper and the formation of this summit. Back in 2012, which seems like a long time ago, I was starting Social Work Helper, and Darla was starting as the president of CSWE. So our career tracks at this point in our life was parallel, but we didn't know it at the time. And as a young, well, not so young, but I was in my 30s when I started Social Work Helper. And, I was a child welfare social worker. And owning a digital platform was not what was in the cards, but that's kind of how things went. And so when I started this platform and ended up getting a following on social media, Darla was one of the first people that gave me access to the first White House briefing on social work and determinants of health. And that access helped to validate my platform and open many doors where I was able to get access to several White House events. I was able to get press access for covering the Pope when he went to DC. So her being able to give access to spaces that I didn't have relationships with really helped to support a Black-owned female business. And it has been that way throughout our tenure. He is the editor of Social Work Helper and her as president of CSWE. And when I reached out to her, we started doing virtual summits before it was in vogue, before COVID hit. And I had reached out to her back in 2017 and told her that I wanted to help give access to people of color and, as far as presenting, as well as access to a global or national summit or conference, because it's really, at that time, it was really expensive to be able to afford to go to a conference. By the time you talk about taking the time off of work, getting hotels, and just paying for the conference fees or the membership fees, it put this experience out of reach for a lot of people. When I reached out to Darla and told her what I was thinking about doing, that I wanted to develop, she was on board, and she has helped bring other people on board to support this, to where now we have, I think our last count was like 35 schools sponsoring this event. So it has grown tremendously in 4 years. and I'm proud to have her as an ally and a friend. So, Darla, could you talk a little bit about what has driven you to support people like me and platforms like mine to help elevate people of color even before anti-racist buzzword everybody's you were doing it before then. So could you speak to that a little bit?
Well, first, thank you, Deona. And I first want to say that it really feels like a privilege to be able to partner with you in this. It is interesting to think about the fact that we began the latest leg of our professional journey at about the same time. It does feel like it was ages ago in 2012. And that first White House briefing was so exciting. And what I decided when I joined CSWE was that I wanted to, it's a membership organization and I need to listen to our members, but not all members. Like when I think of members, they're everybody who's participating in the preparation and maintaining, competence and relevance in their social work careers. They're not just in schools of social work. They're all over the place. And I know that there's lots of people that think that there's way too many organizations within our social work ecosystem. I'm not one of those people. I actually feel like for every other organization that's emerged, like Social Work Helper, it's emerged because it's identifying a gap. And if CSWE isn't attending to the same folks that Social Work Helper is, then we need to be partners. We need to listen. So it wasn't about, I didn't feel threatened or competitive. It was just like, okay, I don't know where this is. I didn't even know who you were, So, but I had a good instinct for the fact that I was watching you and I was watching that you were engaging people who were not in some of the more quote unquote traditional spaces and weren't some of the same voices that show up in the spaces that I've been in. And we need to hear all of those voices. So it was a deep commitment to inclusivity and equity. So yes, and thank you for that. Like anti-racism has become a big buzz, and I appreciate that. I think that we need to ride this wave. I think we need to lead it too. And I also think that we need to remind ourselves that we have been at equity, through fits and starts, clearly need to do better, but we have been at social justice and equity since the beginning of our profession. This is not a time for us to act like somebody else who just heard about these things. Right? So it is a time for us to, look at ourselves critically and figure out where we might have gone astray or not done as much as we could have and should have. But that's not to erase some really important history and some pioneers who have led this work for a really long time. Let's learn from them all over again. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for asking and inviting us to be a partner. I can't wait for, I hope to have an opportunity to listen to lots of the presentations because, like I said, these are a lot of folks that you have brought into the summit are not people that show up in some of the more traditional spaces, and yet their voices are so important and so valuable.
Yeah, I think it's, I always look at collaboration as an opportunity to expand your natural network, right? Because say for instance, my network expands because one, I try to be inclusive, and if I don't know someone in my network, I will reach out to people on Twitter and LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm hosting something, but I don't feel like we're representing your community or representing your perspective. Will you come and share that with us, right? So not only do, if you're being inclusive in want to respect other people's communities, you have to recruit, reach out. And that's what I appreciate about Darla. She sees that, there are things that CSWE does really well. And being able to coalesce academia and be able to work with HBCUs, which I'm going to get her to tell us about, because they are doing things and have the ability to be able to connect universities all across the United States. And so they have the, I guess, resources to be able to pull those people into work groups and look at problems and do research. Could you talk about some of the, we sat in on this meeting where they created a work group to see how anti-racist policies can be implemented in the universities, in the schools of social work. Could you talk about that, Darla?
Yeah, it's one of the most exciting things that I feel like we've done this year, and it's still in progress. So, I don't have any final products, but it was shortly after the murder of George Floyd, when you think about his murder on top of several others, and it became a lightning rod. And I reached out to my board chair, Dr. Sandra Starks, who has been a great collaborator, and said, you know what, I think we need to capitalize on this moment. Like, this is an opportunity for us to think about, take stock of social work education, where we are, where we should be, and how can we make us more explicitly anti-racist. Definitely influenced by the readings of Dr. Kendi, who we had at our last APM. So he wrote the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, but before that, wrote Stamped from the Beginning, which is a fabulous history, a devastating history, but puts it out really clearly about the origins of racism and racist ideology and so forth. And so in that moment, I thought, we need to not only be thinking about how to partner with people to create a more just society, we need to look at ourselves.
Right.
As CSWE, as an organization, responsible for accreditation, but lots of other things too. And I appreciate that you noticed that. Lots of people think of CSWE only as about accreditation, and it's like, right, so many other things too. But we were born at a time when it was almost impossible not to be part of a racist system. Look at the parallels between professionalism and colonialism, for instance. Right. So anyway, Dr. Sandra Starks and I had this fabulous conversation, and the idea of this task force was born. And we wanted to look at 4 different areas: curriculum, faculty development, conferences and faculty development, like knowing that we probably needed to support faculty in leading and having some of these conversations. Also, our accreditation standards, our educational policy and accreditation standards, and what we might need to do there. And then looking at it's almost implicit curriculum, like the ways in which schools might be attending to or not equity issues around, faculty, staff, and students. So we formed those 4 work groups, got some fabulous people to co-chair. We engaged over 70 people, wow, educators, but not all, some practitioners in their communities. And they did this fabulous work and came up with over 100 different recommendations. A little overwhelming.
I can imagine.
You can't implement that many recommendations all at once, but we're just beginning to sift through and identify sort of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of how we can begin to implement these recommendations so that CSWE becomes a force for anti-racism equity in our schools of social work.
That's amazing. I mean, it's good that, well, one, it's not expected. That is a lot of recommendation. That's a lot to see, to sift through, and it takes time. Or I guess what I'm trying to say is that you want to be able to have a basis of information, but always constantly being fluid. And I think that's the important part of trying to change or improve any system is that you have to be willing to be fluid and look at change as an opportunity and problems as an opportunity to improve. One of the things that we had to face with this particular summit that we did not encounter or even think of was white supremacist groups trying to get access to our code for our schools and things in order to disrupt. And so it did create some extra work. But I'm a firm believer that when problems arise, if we don't look at them as another barrier, but just look at them, this is an opportunity to improve. What policies, what changes can we implement to protect and create a safe environment? And so the same thing with anti-racist and looking at how to put schools, get schools to be more inclusive and have more equity. If we see this as opportunities to improve instead of saying, well, I've done something wrong. No, we're just trying to make an environment safer for everyone. And if we can get people to look at anti-racism for just as improvement and creating safe environment and safe spaces for everyone, then I think we can start to change that terminology and that mindset that, we just, people become defensive when we talk about race. And so if we can get them to say, oh, well, we're just trying to create safe spaces and environment, maybe that can start to change people's thinking.
So I just want to reflect that you sound like a social worker. And what I mean by that is recognizing that change is a process and not an outcome. And you're sort of wanting to highlight the need for, embracing opportunities for change and seeing as opportunities and not necessarily obstacles, and being fluid. Like, that's what we hope that every graduating social worker comes out of school. Like, everybody wants a cookbook and a recipe, and that's great. I love to cook, and I always start with a recipe and I follow it to the T. And then I get a chance to experiment a little bit. It's like, well, I want a little bit more heat here, a little less there. And, that's the difference between following a recipe and being a master chef. Not that I'm a master chef, but, that whole notion of it's not just a checklist of things to do, but staying open, recognizing signals and responding to them, not being, defeated by obstacles, but seeing them as opportunities. I love hearing social workers talk about this.
Yeah, I think what we learn to become so goal and outcome driven, right? That if we don't get specific outcomes or we don't have a measurable, that it's a failure, right? And so when I look at these summits, right, our goals, maybe we're just now achieving some of the outcomes that we had hoped starting out 4 years ago. But what we looked at is, one, we had to change. We had to change different models. Some things worked, some things didn't. And so we just kind of built on each year, learning what we didn't know, because when you're making changes, there's a lot of things you don't know. There's a lot of things that arise that you can't fix it unless you do it, right? And then as you do it, you learn and you get better and you create a better model. But that ability to not see those obstacles as barriers, but opportunities to improve and to, create your model, I think that has helped us get to where we are today. Because last summit, we had about 5,200 people. This summit, we're getting close to 3,000, and I anticipate more signing up. The white supremacist group did put a kink in our registration process, but I think it'll be good for us with the policies that we've implemented for next time. So you're going to hear more from Darla because she has a session on the 18th. She's going to be speaking right before Term Wise, and so you will get to hear more about what CSWE is doing. Also learn more about their annual conference that's coming up in November, and she'll be talking more about that. So we have Kevin Brizant, who's going to be presenting in T-2 minutes. So I'm going to move to his session so I can talk to him for a little bit. It's World Social Work Day, so we're going to be celebrating social work around the world. Kevin is from London, and we're going to talk to him before he gets into his session. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for showing up so early to talk to me and Darla, and we're going to get prepared for Kevin. Darla, do you have any closing comments, remarks?
I just can't wait to see what we create over the next few days. So here we go.
All right, guys. Thank you for showing up this morning. See you in the next session.
Take good care.